We're back again, and on today's episode, we're covering off the hotel quarantine inquiry, the Omnibus legislation and what that means for Victorians, the upcoming Queensland election, border closures and how that affects our economy, the US election, and the hospitality and entertainment industries, and the devastation that's caused broadly across Victoria and the nation. We've also got a special guest joining us today, so stay tuned for a big one, and here we go.
Welcome to Beyond the Political Spin, your weekly dose of politics, economics, common sense, and things that matter. No lefties, no political correctness, no agenda, no bullshit, and absolutely no political spin. Here's your last line of defence for common sense. Adrian Aiello, Vince Lochisano, and Richard Stockman.
Vincenzo, welcome.
Yes, Adrian, great to be back. And unfortunately, Richard's not with us today. He's out campaigning for his local election.
Running a duo today.
The council election's coming up shortly.
Local council election. Where's Blue Lake Ward?
Yes, in the Shire of Nelumbic.
He's running around like a madman, sending out his, dropping off his flyers and doing all that type of thing. So he's working real hard, and he's got no time for us this week.
That's all right. I'm sure we'll cope without him, and hopefully he'll be back next week.
He's left us high and dry without any wine.
But we actually are replacing him in a way this week because we have a special guest coming up who's going to be on the phone with us to discuss how these restrictions in Victoria have affected the business that she and her husband operate in South Melbourne. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it's actually a good insight. Like she's actually been affected twice over. So they, they run an accommodation side of the business as well, which has been affected as well as the food service. So it'd be great to chat to her and get a real insight for what they're all going through.
It's been a big week since we last got together. So much to cover. In fact, I don't think we'll cover it all at all. But
stay tuned. We've got 4 hours to get through.
No, hopefully not that long. People won't be able to stand my voice for that long. That's for sure.
We've had the a lot spoken about with this omnibus legislation that is quite scary for a lot of people. So we're going to cover off that, but. More importantly, and I think something that caught the attention of everybody was the
final interviews that were conducted by the hotel inquiry, the hotel quarantine inquiry,
which gave us a conclusion that no one knows anything.
Yeah, it was a bit like that Maxwell Smart episode where he gets asked questions left, right and centre and he just says, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And they said, well, what if they decided to fire you, Mr. Smart? And he said, they can't do that. And he said, why not? And he said, because I know too much. But we have a chuckle about it now, but it is not a laughing matter. I mean, it
was a laughable display. It was a laughable display.
Yeah.
But no, it's by no means.
It's become a joke in a way that doesn't actually put a smile on your face at all. It's now not only cost double of what was originally allocated, it's now $6 million instead of $3 million. Funny about that. Wonder why that would happen under a Labor government. But anyway, and the other thing is the real thing that we're trying to establish here, which is who made the decisions about using private security guards and who administered the program. No one can answer. All of these politicians, public servants, no one can remember anything. I mean, if we're expected to believe that, they must take us totally for fools.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll say this much.
We saw that, though. The way they conducted themselves in that inquiry was...
If that is the end answer and no one will own up to anything, well, then ultimately the Premier, as he has already said, I am accountable for all of the decisions of my government and all of the programs that are administered by my government. So you know what? It's time to let your actions speak louder than words, Mr. Andrews, because saying I'm accountable and then turning around and saying, oh, but I'm not going anywhere because I don't run away from any problems and challenges.
It's the arrogance in that assumption that his job is
to fix it.
Yeah.
Is that what he means by I'm accountable? So it's my job to now fix what I've created.
So I've just destroyed a company. Let's say we work, you're holding a job, a senior job, right? CEO of a company, totally destructed the place.
Yep.
You come up to your directors and they've set you down to say, look, given the circumstances, given the recent times, we no longer
definition-
require your services.
Yeah.
And what's the response? Sorry, but no. I'm not going anywhere because I don't stray from challenges. No, sir, but
In the private sector, you get sacked.
Right.
Full stop.
no, but we're sacking you. We don't
Exactly. You're not required to come back.
No, but I've told you. I told you when I took the job.
Yeah.
I don't stray from challenges. So I'll see you tomorrow at 9
You've got to
o'clock.
understand that most of these people have never worked in the private sector. They don't understand it. They don't understand the concept of accountability. Clearly, in his mind, I'm accountable means it's up to me to fix it on my massive salary, which is the second highest salary of any politician in the country behind the Prime Minister,
For which we pay.
which went up about 12% on the 1st of July, by the way. That's how much pain and suffering he's had to endure. But the fact of the matter is, when you've stuffed up like this to this magnitude, and it has not only created a second wave, it has cost lives to the tune of 770 or 80 lives or whatever it is at the moment.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you know we had a royal commission back in 2009 into the Black Saturday bushfires, right? A royal commission.
absolutely.
Something like 170
Yep.
or 178
To
or
find
9
the
lives
cause.
were lost in that. And we had a royal commission.
Yep.
This has cost 770 odd lives. So, frankly, I'm calling upon the Prime Minister, okay, let's not stuff around here. The federal government should be calling for a royal commission into what has happened down here so that we get some real answers. This inquiry, which has cost $6 million instead of $3 million, hasn't achieved a thing.
right.
Yet, seriously, unless it claims the scalp of Daniel Andrews as an absolute minimum, to me it's been a total waste of time and money. And a royal commission will get right down to the bottom of it. I mean, this is the sort of thing that gets right down to the
this is the
nitty
sort of
gritty. Criminal charges can be laid as a
absolutely.
result of a royal commission. So there, all of a sudden, we'll start seeing who runs for cover and how many of these government ministers are going to cover up for each other during an inquiry like this. It's just not good enough. It's unacceptable. And frankly, this government ought to be ashamed of itself. Anyone who's part of it should be ashamed of what they're actually part of.
What they stand for.
Yep. And anyone who can not see the sense in what we're saying, I question their intelligence, because I still to this day hear people supporting and Andrews and
To
his
the
government.
extent of people saying, I love Dan.
Oh,
Right?
please.
Now, we are very anti-Andrews government. There is no ifs, no buts, no doubt about it. Right?
I am anti any government who behaves in
but
this fashion.
we are anti-Andrews
I don't care whether they're
government.
Labor, Liberal or anyone else.
Correct. We are anti-Andrews government, and it's by no way due to the fact that they are a Labor government. I want to make that clear. Irrespective whether they were a Greenie, a Liberal,
Comes
whatever.
down to actions.
It comes down to actions, and it comes down to the way they conduct themselves
Correct.
for the people of Victoria. And at the moment, no matter what party they are associated with, there is no way anybody can stand by this man, by his party, and by the actions that are being taken upon us and our livelihoods. The destruction of our lives is nothing to be standing up for. I do not understand how these people can constantly, mistake after mistake, stand up for this man. I cannot understand it.
Well, the inquiry came to an end as far as the interviewing goes, and what has come out as a result of it is that the police, the Victoria Police, had a very big part to play in the decision that the government ended up making. I'm not absolving the government in any way for the decision that they made, but the police clearly were not keen at all in standing by at hotel rooms and being part of that quarantine, especially from a frontline point of view. They were happy to be called in if there was trouble, but they did not want to have any of their members standing guard at hotels and hotel rooms. Now, that decision there has led to, in a very short space of time, someone making the decision that, okay, the police don't want to be part of this.
Let's outsource.
Right? So the tail is wagging the dog in terms of the police is dictating to the government what it wants, and the government seems to fall in line every time. So the government has allowed the private security firms to take the main role in guarding those hotels. The one I reckon who's got a hell of a lot more to answer for is the bureaucrat who's on over $600,000 a year, who's meant to be Daniel Andrews' right-hand man in terms of heading up his department, the Department of Premier and Cabinet. And that guy there received 3 separate letters from the Prime Minister. And Daniel Andrews in his evidence said, I didn't know anything about this. And if I did know anything about it, it might have changed my decision about what we do with ADF. Now, are you trying to seriously tell us that, first of all, that Eccles didn't tell Andrews? And even if he didn't tell Andrews, he ought to be sacked.
Correct.
If that's the case, that he can't recall disclosing this email to Andrews, and Andrews doesn't recall ever hearing about it, Eccles needs to go.
Absolutely.
But does Andrews make that move now? No, he doesn't. They're all covering for each other.
Either way this goes, whichever way this goes, there is clearly accountability somewhere, right? There is guilt amongst...
It's Andrews. Doesn't matter who's let him down underneath him. They've basically outsourced the entire risk of this virus spreading amongst the community to a bunch of nightclub bouncers.
We saw evidence. We saw return travellers posting video footage of these blokes in the hallways asleep.
Yep.
We knew they were sleeping with return travellers.
And what does Daniel Andrews offer at the end of this? I unreservedly apologise to the Victorian public. Sorry, Mr. Andrews, apology not accepted.
Too late.
It's not good enough.
And it's too late.
It's too little too late. And frankly, you need to go.
Whether we get a conclusive result out of this inquiry or not, if they want to go down the path of no one knows anything, that is just as incriminating,
of course,
as knowing.
Of course.
Right? Now we're not talking some little state issue here. No. We're talking a global pandemic. Well, that's what we were told.
Yep.
Now we were being told left, right, and centre how dangerous this pandemic was.
Yeah, it still does it today.
And how great the health risk to us was.
Yep. Wildly infectious virus.
Yet you find it appropriate to leave it up to a privatised security company who then outsourced to the general public, right, for people they deemed appropriate to come and man these hotels.
Yep.
So you've just put our livelihoods, our health...
That's what I was just saying.
Right?
He's outsourced the risk.
Into the responsibility of...
Yeah, of a bunch of nightclub bouncers.
How is that excusable? It
is inexcusable.
The people that think that is okay and talk daily about the fact that it wasn't his fault, how could he control... That's bullshit.
Yep.
Every other state in Australia got it right.
Yep. And they accepted the help from the federal government.
Let's not forget, we are the only state in Australia
who stuffed it up.
That is in this mess.
Yep. And as a result of the second wave, Victorians travelled over to New South Wales and Queensland and started spreading it there.
Yeah, and let's face it, it's not a second wave. I don't want people to, this second wave, that lets him off the hook. It's not a second wave. This is a fuck up, right? This is not... by any means, a second wave.
No. It's a second wave that was caused by...
A second wave is what we might see once we open up the doors again.
Yeah.
Right? This is by no means a second wave. This is a total mess.
Shambles. But the other thing is this. The decision, to award the contract is another thing I want to talk about.
Well, the cost...
Do you know that it cost... do you know the value of that contract?
To actually listen to
3 months. 3 months of putting guards out the front of hotels. $30 million for 3 months. It was not put out to tender, right? It was just given to these companies. Why did it get given the contract? It's got a very, very patchy history, to say the least. Indigenous owned. Honestly, it just makes you shake your head.
Yep.
The basis on which some of these people are given contracts like that.
Just the cost. If that doesn't blow your mind, that's $10 million a month, right, to guard hotels. And,
that's
the quality.
$33,000 a day.
But the quality of these individuals that were manning and guarding the hotels.
Yeah, they were getting paid $20 an hour.
On Airtasker. For anyone who knows what Airtasker is, that's an app that tradies go to or people can go to find a tradie to do a little home project.
Yep. That's what I mean. There were no...
These people were in charge of our health.
There were no checks, there were no limitations, there were no conditions which prevented the company from doing this, clearly. And that's another failure of the government.
How people do
because
not
otherwise they
understand
would be able to sue these companies for doing what they did.
Just
I mean,
ridiculous.
it's just
insane. It absolutely baffles me.
But anyway,
the fact that you can be in such a pandemic, such a dangerous time in our lives, yet it's just the can's kicked down the road again and left for someone else to manage.
But you know what this highlights, Adrian? Why did they make these decisions? I'll tell you why. Because the first and foremost thing that enters their mind is not, and it should be, but it is not, what's in the best interests of the Victorian people and their health and safety. That is clearly not the number one priority. The number one priority when something like this happens is who can cash in on the contracts. So over to the union movement we go. Right, who's going to get this contract? Oh, our mates over there, they own that company, give it to them. And if the one only motivating factor was what is in the best interest of the people of Victoria in terms of their safety is concerned, these decisions would never have been made.
Yep.
And the offer of support from the federal government at the federal government's cost
would have been snapped up.
Right? To offer ADF support, that would have been snapped up like every other state and territory did.
Yep.
So anyone out there who says, it's not Daniel Andrews' fault that these people all slept around with the return travellers.
Bullshit.
Well, it is their fault because ultimately it's that sort of system of operation which has led to these security guards not only not protecting the return travellers but actually contracting the virus from these return travellers and then going to spread it back at home and back to their families and everywhere else. Do you know 99% of every case that they can trace at the moment has come back to that hotel quarantine program?
Yep.
99%. It's basically the whole lot.
And people need to know these facts. Clearly the people that we interact with on a daily basis that support
and yet support the
actions to
but
outsourcing.
But this is the thing that gets me, Adrian. The thing that gets me is who is being made to pay.
Well, no one.
Clearly not the politicians and the bureaucrats and the public servants. They're not being made to pay. They're being rewarded for these mistakes by getting pay rises and guaranteed work. I just don't know how Victoria and specifically Melbourne recovers from this because it has been a ghost town for 6 months.
Yep.
And I think people have underestimated the damage that this is going to cause.
Well, take a walk. I saw
for decades
something on social media the other day where it was a photographer actually that took a walk through the city and posted a whole heap of photos.
Yeah, laneways, alleyways.
It's
all deserted.
I got goosebumps from head to toe.
Ghost town.
The sadness that instills amongst us.
Yep.
There's shop after shop that they've been vacated for lease signs everywhere.
Empty.
Some iconic shops, some iconic pubs and restaurants that we all used to enjoy that are just no longer. The efforts made for recovery, not even just in Victoria but nationwide, it's cataclysmic to the economy. It's going to have massive effects for us all. Like we've spoken about that last episode, but it's just people do need to understand that it needs to stop. Let's put it into perspective.
Yeah.
5 cases at the press conference yesterday. There was 5 cases overnight.
10 this morning.
Now, 5 cases. Now, that's not hospitalisations. That's 5 new cases.
Mm-hmm.
That is one average household in the entire Victoria. Yet, we are continuing the destruction of livelihoods.
By the way, that's Melbourne. That's just Melbourne.
That's 6.6 million in Victoria, I think.
Yep.
So, put that into perspective. How can you justify a total destruction of an economy?
Well, do you know what 5 cases is as a percentage of 5 million?
I can't believe it.
You know how much it is? 5 million, it's 0.0001%. It's effectively been eradicated. New South Wales have already opened up on figures that are larger than this.
I'll read more than that.
And have been able to at least get their economy going. Yeah, well, I mean, put it in perspective. Again, the curfew, for example, the only reason why that was cancelled is because they've been
Well, it's
legal
found
action.
to be illegal. The
Well, legal action's now being taken against the government because of that curfew.
Yeah.
They didn't want to continue it for fear of being proven that they should
well, I
never
think
have
they
had it.
came out and advised him that it's more likely than not
Yep.
it was illegal. So straight away that got canned.
Yep, and of course the other restrictions are all so petty about you can't have a gathering of people in your front yard or your backyard
But you
or
can go to
inside,
the
but you
park.
go to a park and
So go
and
to the
meet with
park
people.
where everyone's going to meet, and there'll be 200 people there.
Well, but it's it's just all rubbish. It really is. Why should they be allowed to get away with this and keep their jobs and keep their big fat cat salaries? It's just a disgrace. Everyone else has had to pay for this.
The families of those, these 700
Oh,
odd
of
deaths.
course. Oh, well, that goes without saying. The families
Who was
of the
accountable
dead
for
people-
them?
Oh,
Who was
and
accountable
they had
for
to
them?
have a funeral with only a handful of people there.
Does his daily press conferences, we feel for the families of the two that have died overnight. That's
It's all
bullshit.
on. You know
Where's
what?
the accountability?
Those press conferences, I can't sit through them anymore because
Where
it
is
is
the
almost like putting
accountability?
on the record button, or not the record button, the replay button. It's the same script every single day. It sounds so clinical and so sterile. There is no genuineness about it at all. It's all scripted so that Daniel Andrews can sound like he's got some empathy.
Well, these people don't need
He hasn't got any
apology.
empathy for these people.
They need accountability.
If he had empathy and he had an ounce of integrity, he would bloody well resign. Okay? Anyone with an ounce of integrity and decency would resign
and we all
and
knew
fall on his sword.
he was
but
always,
he won't.
there was always someone he was going to throw under the bus. Now, he obviously did that with Jenny Makakos. Now, he came out the
She is
following
the
day.
scapegoat.
Well, absolutely. But he came out the following day, and his words were that she took the appropriate action. So it was.
She took the appropriate action because she said that she had lost faith in the ministry and that she could not serve under the Premier anymore. So that's
she stood up against what she thinks is wrong.
Yep.
And he threw her under the bus, and she resigned because of it. Now, if that is the appropriate action taken, because he's put the responsibility on her, he then
There's
followed
a lot
up.
more
He
to it
then
than
no.
just her.
He then claimed full responsibility. In his words, he claimed responsibility for everything to do with that. Mm-hmm. So where is that same appropriate action that he says was appropriate action in regards to Jenny Makakos resigning?
Mm-hmm.
So there's double standard here,
Yep.
right?
Oh, but I don't run away from problems and challenges, he says.
So what is that? So her running was appropriate action?
And I'll say this much. If Victorians re-elect this government, if he and his government are still in place in 2 years from now, when the next state election is due, and they decide to re-elect this government, what does that say about Victorians?
Well, I think at that stage you deserve what you get.
Well, exactly. I would say that. You know what? You deserve to live in misery. You deserve to live with all of the liberties and freedoms that our forefathers fought for in world wars.
That our children
to maintain in this country.
Yeah, that our children are not going to see.
You're prepared to let those go? It is a disgrace what Victoria has become. Anyway.
Let's move along. A massive issue that we've
Lots of other things happening in the world other than just what's happening here.
A few people have actually contacted us via the Facebook page, which is which we
if you haven't found us,
a bit of traction actually.
Beyond the Political Spin on Facebook, like our page and let us know what you think and leave some comments. And if you want to abuse me, all you lefties, go for your life.
Well, I did actually post a video yesterday, which kind of got a fair bit more traction than a couple of the standard posts, but I think
that's because people could see how beautiful you are, Adrian.
I obviously have the
You're
head
such
for
a
video,
beautiful man,
as you do the head for radio. So
that's the only reason why I'm not on. I've got a perfect head for radio.
But yeah, we did get contacted by a couple of people who wanted us to talk about the omnibus legislation. For those who have seen that come about, and
by the way, where do you catch this bus?
It's not one that I want to catch anyway.
It's actually not a laughing matter because this is another example of where the government, right, is in overreach yet again in terms of restricting not only what we can do, but it's actually empowering themselves even greater to take action that normally would require the police and would normally require evidence and proof. Now, these
powers being given to government bureaucrats,
yeah,
these are powers over and above what what police have.
Yeah.
Right? So for the
And
common
they're putting
person,
it in the hands of who?
what government bureaucrats. So if I've actually got it here. Now there's a
So someone that's listening to this podcast right now that works for Daniel Andrews can decide that they're going to go and arrest me in my own home.
Absolutely.
Because they suspect that I'm going to break the rules. Is that right?
Well, so what it states here is that
Without any accountability of how or why or what evidence?
Yep.
Nothing.
so any person appointed under the subsection 1, person the secretary considers appropriate for appointment based on the person's skills, attributes, experience, or otherwise. Now, this is one of the most dangerous
otherwise is a very
legislations I have ever seen. Now, thankfully, what's come about in the last few days is that the crossbenchers have kind of given a signal that they're going to reject this.
Yeah, but they did that with the 12-month
then
extension of the state of emergency, and then
came
they
out and passed
decided
it.
to negotiate 6
If
months.
anyone in their right state of mind could pass this legislation, right?
I have no confidence in those
Now,
people
we'll just
all.
make a couple of points on this legislation. Firstly, let's talk
it's-
about the
hang
fact
on,
that
hang
this is going through Parliament at the moment.
Well, it's
This
gone
is going
through the lower house.
It's gone through the lower house.
So the
It's gonna
Labor
get passed
Party
through
have
the
actually
Senate.
passed it through.
Correct. It's gonna-
Those Labor ministers and MPs should hang their heads in shame for
Now,
starters.
in a time
How ridiculous.
of this crisis, when we are seeing 5 or 10 cases a day in a population of 6.6 million people,
Why is it required?
these are measures that they're saying are required. Now, he has
So
stated...
they're bringing this in now that the numbers are down to, it's between 0 and 10 a day.
So he's stated that these numbers
Why
are
is it required?
essential in keeping the case numbers low. Now, these measures, let's talk about the measures that he's saying are essential in keeping the case numbers low. We're talking about government bureaucrats being given the power to arrest and detain for an indefinite period of time. Indefinite period of time. In addition to this, what's part of this legislation is that they can also have the power to remove children from their home of care for up to an extended period of 30 months. Now, that's 2.5 years. Right? Now, this is based on them having suspicion, and I've got the legislation right here because we've got a copy of this omnibus legislation. So, a high-risk person is someone that the designated authorised officer reasonably believes is not going to comply. Right? So, based on
So all I've got to
suspicion,
believe is that I'm not going to comply.
based on suspicion.
So there's no
So
onus
let's-
of evidence or proof.
No, so there's no trial, there's nothing. Right? There are not being... It's bullshit.
So someone listening to me, for example,
These are
today can
powers.
say, I reckon this guy's going to flout the rules. Let's go and arrest him.
It is...
And lock up his children for 2.5 years.
Absolutely ridiculous. These...
Over my dead effing body, let me tell you.
I actually urge people, if whoever's listening to this podcast, please jump onto the Parliament website. There is a copy of the omnibus legislation. It's
And then
quite
go
complex.
straight to your MP, your local MP, and let them know how you feel about
It's
it.
quite complex. You don't need to go through the whole thing, but in the first few pages, I think there's a copy there on the Parliament website, which is only 26 pages. It is there for you all to see. These are measures
But on what
that
basis
are
are they wanting
These
to
are
bring it in?
comparable to Joseph Stalin, the premier of the Soviet Union in Russia.
The president.
Right? These are how these dictators
Yeah.
came about. These
Yep.
are the initial measures taken.
Yep.
You look up pre-war Germany.
They take away your
Pre-war in
liberties,
Germany.
they take away your
This
freedoms.
is how it started. But
and they want to
forget the
control
mass
you.
murders.
Yep.
How it started was
Yep.
the removal of all liberties, the removal of capitalism and everything that comes in between. And this is how it starts, with bullshit like this.
Well-
and if we let them get ahead and give them these powers, we are in big strife.
Well, let me just say this to Victorians who are listening. This is the government you voted in. This is the government and this is the Premier that you voted in back in 2014, right, who promised at the time, right, that the tearing up of the contract of the East-West Link was going to cost nothing. It ended up costing us $1.25 billion plus. And you forgave that. And not only did you re-elect him 4 years later, you gave him an even bigger and more increased majority in the lower house. Okay? And this is what you get. This is what you get when you empower someone like this from the socialist left who's got massive ties to China, okay, and who believes in this sort of regime, this sort of totalitarianism, okay? This is what you've got because you voted for it. Next time you get an opportunity to vote it out, flush it down the toilet where it belongs.
You need to ask yourself, these measures are so extreme.
Oh,
Now, why in a time where he comes out on a daily basis at the moment and is telling us how well we're doing, how low the case numbers are, and how much we've progressed? Now, ask yourself, is this legislation really part of a measure to protect us and our safety?
No.
Our health and our safety?
No.
Or is there a hidden agenda that is greater than all of us? That is what we need to ask ourselves. Do your research, look it up, and have a little read yourself. This is no bullshit here, but this is a very, very, very dangerous legislation.
Adrian, I think importantly is that a lot of very significant people in the legal industry, QCs, legal heavyweights have come out and condemned this legislation, and they have warned very seriously against it going through. And I'm going to say one thing, if those upper house MPs, okay, in the Senate, allow this to go through like they did with the state of emergency being extended by 6 months, okay, if those people allow this to go through, you people ought to hang your heads in shame forever, okay? And you should be hounded out of office. You should be hounded every night of the week. You should experience nightmares that will stop you from sleeping a wink for the rest of your life. This is the sort of thing that Australia should never be subjected to. What have we become here in Victoria? I mean, other states are scared of us. They are scared of opening up their borders to let us in, okay? Because of not only the coronavirus situation, but I don't think they actually like who we are down here and who we're led by. We have got a real stigma about us in this country. If you're Victorian at the moment, you look down upon. You're not even ridiculed in a laughing sort of a way. You actually look down upon and condemned.
We're costing the entire country money. We're hurting.
We are.
We're not just hurting Victoria's economy here.
Yeah.
We are damaging in a massive way the nation's economy.
Yep.
So for those two, actually before we leave this, I'm going to drop it here, but I want to just make a point. For those who don't know what the Magna Carta is, the Magna Carta is what our Australian Constitution is based. This is the foundation of the Australian Constitution. The Magna Carta is one of the oldest forms of constitutional foundation. Now, the Magna Carta promotes freedom and the right to be tried fairly, and that nobody, not even the monarch, is above the law. Now, this dates back to 1215.
Yep.
Right? Now, this is the basis for not only the Australian Constitution, but it's a foundation for many constitutions
over
around the
800
world.
years.
Right? This bloke is tearing to shreds what has instilled freedom amongst people for centuries.
Yep.
Right? We have to stand up for what we know is right and for our future.
Well, we've had a taste already, okay, of a rogue premier, okay, who is all about socialism. The socialist left faction of the Labor Party is where he comes from, okay, and he has clearly no idea about how business operates, and he seems to be hell-bent on destroying and putting a stake through the heart of small and medium-sized businesses in Melbourne. And, I mean, even measures like face masks. In regional Victoria, where there's basically no virus, there's no cases happening, people can't even walk down the street without wearing a mask.
On your own.
On your own. In a country town.
Yep.
Where there's no virus, hasn't been any... Some of these towns, most of these towns, have never seen any hint of the virus. Yet it's against the law and they'll be fined $200 if they're found to have walked down the street without a mask on. I mean, what sort of control, what sort of sick bastard imposes restrictions like that on people?
Yep.
It is taking us for the biggest ride. And I'll tell you what, we should never forget this. We should never, ever, once this is over, never forget this.
Well,
we should condemn this sort of behaviour by a government forever in a country like Australia.
We as the Victorian people need to set an example.
Oh,
that's what we have to do.
I'll tell you what.
To let any future government know that this state is not going to stand for this any longer.
We're at the end of September, okay? Christmas is in 3 months' time. If Daniel Andrews is not gone by then, and if the ministers that have stuffed up are not gone by then, okay, I think there's going to be hell to pay. There's going to be massive revolt by the people before Christmas. Because if we aren't completely opened up, without all of this totalitarian regime controlling us to the extent that they have over the last 6 months, okay, there's going to be hell to pay. If there's still more of these ridiculous restrictions, even face masks should be wiped out. Forget all that rubbish. There's no virus out there anymore. Okay? It is just so impractical and ridiculous to impose face masks for the next 3 to 6 months. But of course, he's got his state of emergency until the end of March. So believe me, if he's still there in one way, shape or form, Victorians, you're going to be copping it until the end of March.
Yep. All right, let's carry on. We've got another couple of things to get through. So talking hospitality and entertainment industry, we have a very special guest today. He's also a great friend of ours.
Glenda Bagios from the Coppersmith Hotel. Thanks for joining us this morning, Glenda.
You're very welcome.
And,
thanks for inviting me.
That's all right. We essentially wanted to get you on just to share with us your story about what's happened since we were all hit with the news about the coronavirus outbreak that had basically gotten a bit out of control overseas, and then we decided to shut our borders here and take all sorts of remedial action, or at least the federal government did back in March. How did you take the news when it first happened, if you cast your mind back about 6 months ago?
Well, yeah, it was pretty unfortunate, the timing. It was going to be one of our biggest weekends, being the Australian Grand Prix, as we're right next to the track.
That's right. 2 days before the Grand Prix was on. Meant to be.
That's right. And consequently, we had a full... we have accommodation with 15 hotel rooms. We were booked out with our rooms, booked out with our functions and the restaurants and the rooftop. So that had a real detrimental effect to the business, of course, with announcing on Friday that it was not to go ahead.
It really was a Black Friday, wasn't it? Friday the 13th. That was in limbo
for a few days, and then we were all just waiting, and then they pulled the pin. And
Friday the 13th. Yeah. So you had functions booked. You had your hotel, 15 hotel rooms there, all booked out. The restaurant fully booked, and you had to cancel it all.
We had to cancel. We obviously, had bought so much, whether it be food, everything, for the hotel, staffing, all that had obviously been increased for the 4 days, because that's one of our busiest weekends.
Yeah, I think that's what people, underestimate is, I've come from a long background in hospitality. My father has had restaurants for years and years, so I know you being in the industry, you understand, like, the preparation is...
That's right.
For these busy periods, it's enormous.
Yeah, well, that's right. There's, you've got such an influx of not only people staying there, you've got the foot traffic going past. So you've got, as I said, it's been increasing since we've opened a Coppersmith in 2014. I mean, we've had the hotel for 15 years. It's formerly the cricket club, but since 2014, and with the Grand Prix being right next to us, it certainly has increased for us. And it would have been, as I said, one of our biggest weekends, and that just ended on the Friday, which we were all just couldn't believe it.
It would have taken the stuffing out of you. But
I think it hurts too, because they're hit twice at the Coppersmith. Like a lot of other hotels, you've got accommodation as well as food service. So it's not just your typical restaurant that gets, they're shopping.
Well, that's right. We're a boutique hotel. We've never really done takeaways anyway. We've always been a boutique hotel, and with our food too. And with regards to the first lockdown, so we still had borders open, which helped still, because we could still operate our accommodation, because we do have a lot of interstate, mainly Sydney people and international staying with us.
Yep.
So, of course, the international had ceased. However, the interstates were still coming through.
And at that time of year, of course, middle of March, it's still pretty warm weather. So your rooftop terrace, which has some magnificent views over the city and South Melbourne, that would have been open under normal circumstances and entertaining a few more people up there.
That's correct, yes. We've got one of the best views in Melbourne on our rooftop, and accommodate 50 odd up there, and it's pretty amazing. Lots of successful functions on the roof and weddings, and that's the thing. That's the other thing. The best weather we would have been having in March.
Yep.
And couldn't do that either.
Well, of course, the Friday the 13th was the day that everything felt like it was coming to an end. But it continued right through till the day after Mother's Day, which happened to be Monday the 11th, I think it was, of May. I think Mother's Day was on Sunday the 10th. That would have also cost you a fair bit right through the Easter period, and then Mother's Day missing out on that as well.
Well, that's right. Major events like Mother's Day, Father's Day, which again because we're closed, Easter,
you can't
grand final.
all the milestones throughout the entire year.
Yeah, well, we do like a grand final eve that we do a big function. That's been the last 2 years, which pretty much takes over the whole hotel. All these things, obviously are just gone now, and it's been costing us approximately $2,000 a day being closed with all our overheads, etc.
It's exactly that people need to know. It's not that you shut the doors and there's no expenses.
We've still got ongoing costs.
The overheads continue. It's just massive.
Of course. Can I ask you, Glenda, the federal government announced the JobKeeper program. Has that helped you and George to keep the place not only alive but keep certain staff on, or have you been able to take advantage of that?
Well, yes. So it helped for a couple of staff initially with the first lockdown, because we had a couple of staff that were, because it only was if the staff were there for a while and they weren't
you'd have a lot of staff that come and go and
casual.
Correct.
So
come and go. All our travellers were not entitled to anything, so we couldn't keep any of them on.
A lot of them would have gone back home, I imagine, too.
Well, that's correct. A lot of them couldn't survive without getting any sort of funding at all, or any sort of job, unless they did something else. But with us, no, we had no revenue coming in, so it did affect us a lot. The government grants and assistance is just a band-aid approach. Our electricity costs are just ridiculous. We've got so much food, alcohol in the hotel that we bought up, obviously, even with the second lockdown. We were starting a new menu that next day. They locked us down again.
That was going to be my next question, because 12th of May they sort of reopened up the economy again, but by the end of June you would have been back to getting almost back to normal again to some degree, and all of a sudden they announced the next lockdown with no notice.
9th of July we're off. We opened on the 12th. By the time we got, as we had hardly any staff from our previous, with the previous lockdown, we had to get new staff in, train up, pretty much a whole new kitchen, wait staff, etc. So we reopened on the 12th. Then to be told again.
That was when they briefly opened for 20 patrons.
Yeah, we closed. Then to be told we are closing on the 9th.
Yeah.
And by then, borders were shut. So as I said,
and you've stocked up on food, you've stocked up on supplies.
Because then we were gearing up to, we had that next milestone, which was going to open up to 50 patrons inside, which a lot of businesses previous to that weren't able to run it at a reasonable cost. So that 50 patrons, which I think a lot of restaurants were gearing up to kind of restart again, to make some money from 50 people. And it was the day before or something. It was just, that's it, pulled the pin. And
what do you think of the policy, Glenda, that the government comes up with, where it's 10 people or 20 people or 50 people? Do you agree with that, or do you think it should be based on the size of the business, and so long as we've got social distancing measures within the I guess the square area of the premises, you should be able to have 100 or 200 if it's big enough?
Well, I think maybe based on the size. I think that the 10 or the 20 is ridiculous.
One size fits all policy.
This is what amazes me.
And now, we opened with a COVID safe plan. We were, we did all the big, distance all our tables. Yeah. We, sanitizers everywhere. Our staff were trained what to do. We had screens on our bars, all that sort of thing. We had QR codes, so you'd scan when you walk into the hotel, all that sort of thing we had in place. And I think not just us, many other businesses are just doing the right thing, and I just don't understand why. For example, you can go to your local supermarket and there's 1,000 people there touching everything, but we're all doing the right thing. It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And, you've had restaurants and hotels and hospitality closed for so long. Whereas you've got places like Kmart with these big retail chains, again, corporate organisations.
Hundreds of people in there.
Hundreds of people in there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, you're standing on top of each other and you're shopping. The queues a mile long.
Mm-hmm.
People on top of each other, yet they're able to continue trading for only weeks ago they were. Well, I know you, Glenn, you've been kind of advocating the COVID safe aspect of hospitality a lot on social media too, because I know you guys did gear up for that and you've done all the preparations and put everything in place to do it. Even that comes with cost. There's a lot of these, a lot of people in the hospitality industry that have done that willingly. They're so eager to reopen. We've all been to the Coppersmith, and you see the amount of work that goes into a place that. We've got two owners here that are always there. And I know you guys, as I rely on my wife and I, our sole income is from my business, and you guys too. Like it's your whole livelihood. That's
So at this point in time, Glenda, what are you looking forward to in terms of when you can reopen? What are the rules for your business at the moment, as far as you understand?
Well, okay, I'm not 100% sure because things keep changing.
So you're not doing takeaway, so the business is effectively
We're not doing takeaways. No, we will open.
It's the 26th of November for 20 people outside.
Yeah, but the thing is,
23rd.
Yeah, but I mean that may change. But the thing is, they're talking about outside trading, not inside trading.
Well, the recent decision to bring forward the 26th of October was going to be the next lot of relaxation of restrictions.
That's right.
That's been brought forward to the 19th, and I think the main reason for that, by the way, is so that people can get together for the grand final. So what are you able to do as a business on the 19th? Anything at all?
Well, we can open, but I guess
for how many
outside table service.
It's just purely outside.
And we've actually had to buy more outdoor furniture, so again, an expense onto us to accommodate more people, if that's the case, to be outside dining.
Yeah.
And then putting an extension in with our City of Port Phillip to try and get an extension on our footpath trading. So, again, there are all these extra things.
So what have you got, like 3 or 4 tables? You've got, what, 3, maybe 4 tables?
So we have 3 tables out the front. We've bought an extra 3.
And you'd fit, 6 people on each table maybe?
Yeah, pretty much 6 on each table, and then we could maybe do some tables along the wall, some high tops with 2s along the wall. And then our rooftop, well, we've got tables and chairs on the rooftop already.
Yeah.
But,
I don't think he's stated any indoor dining by the end of the year. Like
I really feel sorry for any of the restaurant or cafe businesses out there that don't have the luxury of any outdoor dining, and they just are purely indoors and they can't open at all.
Yeah.
What can we say? Thanks very much for joining us this morning, and we wish you all the best. And again, thanks very much for sharing some time with us, and I guess sharing your story as to how this pandemic has affected you and your business, and how the state government's laws have done so as well. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you, and all the best to you guys too. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, goodbye.
So we've just heard from Glenda, and a great little insight that was into the pain that a lot of these restaurateurs and hospitality business owners are going through. I myself, as you know, in the events industry, so also crossover with hospitality, and we've been hurting for a long time. First ones to go, and obviously we're looking like we're going to be the last ones out of it. So I feel for anyone in the industry, but Glenda, thank you for giving us a great insight, not only into what you can't do, but also the costs that are ongoing that a lot of people may turn a blind eye to. So
people who've never been in business may have idea about what small business people like.
But even someone that may be in small business, but the hospitality, a lot of these industries are very different. You've got, as she said, you've got stock hole. They're sitting in fridges. You've got electricity that you can't just turn a sheet. If you've got a retail shop, close the door, shut the lights, shut everything, and it's shut. But yeah,
I guess all I'm
unfortunately, you can't
saying
do that
is
with a lot
someone
of
who's
these
only ever
places.
worked for someone else all of their lives,
you wouldn't
just
know.
been an employee,
Yeah.
may not have that sort of grasp of how
you
business
just-
operates
You
behind the
just
scenes.
clear the letterbox and pass the
Yeah.
bills onto the
They just get
boss.
their wage every week and off they go.
So just on this before we take off, we've got a few people that have been raising issues I've noticed about the JobKeeper, and they're starting to point the finger now at the federal government. I want to make a point here that as Victorians, you have to understand that the rest of the country is getting back to business.
Yeah.
Now, I myself, a Victorian, and one that has suffered immensely through these lockdowns.
Yep.
The JobKeeper for me is, well, it's not great, but it is somewhat a lifeline. Right? Now, as much as that is a lifeline for me and for other people in the same situation, to be whinging about the fact and pointing the finger at the federal government for the fact that it's getting cut back now as of yesterday,
It's not
you
an
are
argument.
so misinformed, right?
Yep.
How can you expect the rest of the country? So let's
Fund
say
your living and lifestyle.
that's right. So the rest
Like
of
you
the country's
haven't
getting
lo-
back to business,
People
but
expecting it
because
not-
of
not to lo-
Victoria's
not to lose a cent
mistakes,
out of it.
because of Victoria's mistakes, we are expecting the federal government to pick up the slack, which then means the rest of the country are going to feel the effects of Victoria. So I just wanted to make that point because it kind of pushed my nerves a little bit. I've seen a few people.
I agree.
They're going to know who they are, but if they're friends of mine. But it's just the reality.
They'll know who they are. Don't worry about that.
You need to see the common sense amongst all of this. That yes, if Australia was in it together, which we are far from that, we are not in anything together. If we were in it together and we were all on the same roadmap, by all means, the federal government, it's a blanket measure to help us all. But when you've got one rogue state,
They're
you
on
can't
their own.
expect the rest of us, the rest of the country,
No,
to
I
pick up the
agree.
slack because it comes at a cost.
Yep.
Healthcare, education, we've covered all that.
this is
so why
why-
should they feel the heat of Victoria? That's all I wanted
This
to
is
say.
why Scott Morrison said, okay, when he was asked about, are you going to keep JobKeeper at a higher level for Victorians considering what they're going through down there, and they're in lockdown and curfews and there's no real prospect of businesses employing people and all that. He said, well, we've got the program for everyone. Now, if Victoria's going through different circumstances, let's see what the Victorian government's prepared
That's
to do.
it. It's up to the Victorian government.
Now, it is literally because of their stuff up. They're the ones that should be picking up the slack, if anything else.
Yep.
But even if they did, Adrian, even if Daniel Andrews said, I'm going to pay everyone their JobKeeper, I'm going to top up their JobKeeper so that they get what they used to get, okay, before the federal government reduced it again. Well, who's he doing that with? Well,
Oh,
sorry,
our
what's
money.
he doing that with?
Our money.
Our money.
Yeah.
And he doesn't seem to care how much debt he's putting Victoria in anyway.
No.
Everything's on the credit card. And you know what's scaring me now? That Daniel Andrews, in order to save his own backside, is now promising the biggest recovery program in Victorian history. You know what that told me straight away?
Ching ching.
I am going to spend your money like crazy over the next 2 years. I'm going to try and rebuild all sorts of things. I'm going to go into a massive infrastructure program. And why is he going to do all that? 2 reasons. One, to save his own ass for the next election. And secondly, to serve his union masters, because most of that stuff is going to be unionised work. And if you notice, the so-called businesses that were given a bit of a lifeline on the weekend that they can reopen again,
All union.
unionised workplaces.
Yep.
Right? And if everything you look at that this state government does, you look at through that lens of funneling taxpayer funds through to the union movement and their members, that makes all sense all of a sudden. Everything he does makes sense.
Yep.
If you look at it through that
Well,
lens.
there was I think 170,000 workers back to work.
But that's why he doesn't care about the small
and it's-
businesses.
it's
That's why he
100
doesn't care about the medium-sized businesses.
It's zero from the private sector.
He doesn't care if it all shuts down
Zero
because
from
it doesn't
private
help the
enterprise.
unions.
Yeah.
It's all about funneling taxpayer funds through to the unions and their members. That's what the Labor Party in Victoria is all about, and it's about time that anyone who doesn't see it that way Open your eyes. That's exactly what it's all about.
Yep.
And that's why I think there would have been the unions who would have been consulted about which companies to send the contracts to for the private security that had to be employed for the hotel quarantine program. Anyway,
right. Let's touch on
Queensland
election. Yeah. So I know you've...
Here's another state government that drives me wild.
You've been following this quite a bit as well. They're another mob of
Well,
spenders.
Queensland is now up to something like $90 billion
it's
of
massive,
debt.
Massive. Now we've got the upcoming election.
Yep. You know, again, this government is just I don't know how anyone can forgive it for what it's done. I remember even 18 months ago when we were in the lead up to the federal election and they had that Adani mine, they were holding up the commencement of that mine through all sorts of crazy, typical state government onerous conditions and reports that needed to be tabled, and they were just holding it up for the sake of holding it up. And what did she do in the end when everyone was up in arms? No, we should all of a sudden let this mine happen.
Yeah.
She changes her tune depending on where the votes might be. That's all she does. That's why they've kept the borders locked down, because she's got polling that says to her that the majority of Queenslanders prefer to keep everyone else out. So it doesn't matter how much damage is done to all the local businesses up there. It doesn't matter how much the tourism industry is bleeding to death. They're going to keep their borders shut. Do you know that they haven't had a case? New South Wales hasn't had a case. No one had a case yesterday.
Borders still shut.
Outside of Victoria's 5. So for the entire country, 5 detections of coronavirus, all in Victoria, and yet you've got the WA border still shut, Queensland, South Australia. South Australia's starting to loosen their border now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. We've become, an island of 8 different countries.
Yeah.
Through all of
so
this.
much division in Australia right now.
It's just ridiculous.
And the it's the economic strain though, like the cost to the economy of closing borders.
Yep.
Again, people probably see past a lot of this, but the trade, the sheer cost in closing borders is massive. That's where we're seeing these debts just rise and rise and rise on a week to week basis.
Yep.
It's the economy that's just bloody, we're strangling it.
Well, she's only just started to loosen some of the conditions around the Queensland-New South Wales border. Again, why? Because the feedback is coming through that people are literally ready to lynch you.
Yeah.
You need to, loosen it up a bit. So all of a sudden, no, we're going to loosen it up for New South Wales.
It's just funny how they're using
And ACT all of a sudden is no longer declared a hotspot because it's in the middle of New South Wales. It's my priority to keep Queenslanders safe. I mean, seriously, get off the grass, keep Queenslanders safe, as if that's ever been your priority. It's all about re-election. That's why she spent over $500,000 of taxpayers' money about a week ago to get polling done on these border closures and what people think of them. I mean, it's just it's a shambles. Again, governments spending our money to achieve what they want for their own ends.
Yeah,
it's just stupidity.
So your thought? What have you been following the election over the campaign?
Well, it's
what's your thoughts on?
Well, again, I don't know how much you can rely on the polls.
Deb Frecklington.
Well, I think Deb Frecklington deserves the opportunity, and I think Anastasia Palaszczuk has totally botched it in Queensland. I mean, the debt is out of control.
Yeah. Well, crime is on the increase over there.
Yeah.
Crime's been on the increase for quite a while.
They're not even prepared.
In 2015.
They're not even prepared to issue a budget before the election. They're saying, "Oh no, re-elect us, and then we'll let you know how bloody terrible it is."
Yeah.
I mean, the very fact that they're not prepared to divulge the state of the books before the election, that to me disqualifies them from being re-elected.
Well, it should, absolutely.
Any Queenslander who votes for this government is a moron.
Blindly.
Seriously.
Their employment is on the increase. Crime is on the increase.
Yeah.
They've been her 2 biggest issues. But let's not forget the way she's handled herself the last few weeks.
But she does a lot of what Daniel Andrews does. She does a lot of what Daniel Andrews does in terms of the expansion of the public service in Queensland. It has ballooned out of control. That's what these socialist Labor premiers do. They just balloon the public service so that they can guarantee themselves votes and just expand the public sector workforce at the expense of the private sector.
Yeah.
It's just, and these people who are employed, God knows what they do, but they're all guaranteed their positions. You literally just can't get sacked unless you do something illegal. And even then they cover up for each other. So as far as I'm concerned,
there's a lot of issues there, but she hasn't kind of disclosed much too about the state of Queensland either. So it's very hard to.
Well, as I said, there's no budget. They're not letting people know how bad it is.
Yeah, it's very hard to get a gauge on which way you're going to go.
Oppositions don't win elections; governments lose them. Is true. Well, then Andrews should lose regardless of who the opposition leader is. And of course, in Victoria, it's Michael O'Brien, and he's starting to get a bit more coverage in the media at last. And in Queensland, Deb Frecklington, again, some people have said, I'm not sure that she's the right one. Again, it almost doesn't matter. Palaszczuk disqualifies herself. Frecklington deserves the opportunity.
Yeah.
Oppositions tend to get voted in because of the government's losing elections and losing faith with the people, rather than because the opposition's got some magical solution to everything. What can they promise? They'd be taking over a basket case in both examples, in Queensland and in Victoria. If you are voted in, you will be handed an absolute financial disaster, a mess. You'll be laden with debt and deficit for years before you can get it back under control.
There's no plan either.
You are literally going to be sent in there
as the
like a surgeon
who's
being told, here's a carcass, can you please bring it back to life?
Yeah.
And people need to understand that it's precarious, the financial position of some of our states and territories, because if they get totally out of control, there's no more assets to sell. Andrews, we talked about it last week, has even sold off or at least leased off the port in order to bring in some money.
50 years, yeah.
What do they do next? Start selling off all of the publicly owned land?
To China.
Oh, don't get me started on China. We see
let's talk about the USA.
The debate.
We've got a couple of things tomorrow to cover off. We've got the great debate tomorrow, and it's all about the Trump and Biden election at the moment.
Folks, eliminate one tax loophole out of $1.6 trillion worth. $1.4 trillion worth. Out of $1.4 billion. It's hard to even say it, it's so much.
America was founded on liberty and independence and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free and we will stay free.
God bless America if they can re-elect Donald Trump, because...
Well, again, it's all about what
honestly,
we spoke about.
If they don't,
that simple thing
the Western world is in massive trouble. That's all I can say.
As the report card.
I mean,
the report card speaks for itself.
There are two types of voters in this election. There are pro-Trump voters and there are anti-Trump voters.
That's about all there is.
There is no pro-Biden voters, really. How can anyone in their right mind look at that guy, listen to that guy, a bumbling fool who's half asleep and can't even remember what he said 15 seconds ago, have any confidence that this guy's going to lead the country? He's clearly a puppet. He's been put up there as this lovely old man who's nice and sedate compared to Donald Trump. Okay? And the real people pulling his strings are the left-wing socialists behind it all in the Democratic Party, who once he gets voted in, they will control him and they will end up putting through their agenda. And God help America if they allow this to happen. Yet again, you can love him or hate him as a person. You can despise his hair. You can despise his orange skin. You can despise the way he talks and his ego and all the rest of it. But I would say to you, forget all that. Have a look at the report card. Have a look at what he has done, what he has achieved, and more importantly, the motivation behind his decisions is for pro-America first. American people, American industries, American jobs. And it's not an American-only policy, it's an America-first policy. Okay? So I think the whole future of the Western world is in Donald Trump's hands. If he can get through this election and win for the next 4 years, well, then the rest of us have got a chance. But if the socialists take over in America as of November, boy, oh boy, Australia, New Zealand, England, we're all in trouble. In fact, the whole Western world's in trouble. It'll be very interesting to see this debate tomorrow between Trump and Biden.
Well, Biden is his greatest asset in his campaign. He's pathetic.
Well, I think they'll be juicing him up because he's refusing a drug test. Apparently, he's refused to take a drug test because they're going to pump him up with God knows what to try and make him look half alive. It's like trying to, inject life into a dead body. It'll be like Weekend at Bernie's. Seriously. It'll be Weekend at Biden's. Anyway, I mean, you've just heard a soundtrack there of some of the stuff that he said. There's a lot more than that, I can assure you.
Oh, I had a library.
But anyone in their right mind would not vote for that guy, okay? But more importantly, be aware of what's behind it. It's not so much that Biden's going to be in charge. It's the socialists that are putting him up front so that they can get their agenda through behind him. And eventually they might even retire him and put that other woman in who's the vice president.
Kamala Harris, yeah.
Kamala Harris. And then you'll really see what they're all about.
That's exactly what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen.
If they get in.
Correct. If they get voted in,
yeah,
that's the writings on the wall. That was always going to happen.
Well, do you know what staggers me again?
And she is a pig of a person.
Mm-hmm.
She's an evil bully, typical socialist, communist bloody bully, right? And for anyone to think that she's a great option,
yep.
You got rocks in your head. She's a terrible person. Terrible person. Well, even that's contrary. They bloody, first we're hearing all this crap about her being a black American, only to find out that she's...
Well, she's got a Jamaican father and an Indian mother or something like that. Oh,
pathetic.
Look, it shouldn't come down to the colour of someone's skin.
So she turned into a person of
If you
colour.
just use Martin Luther's words, no person should be judged on the colour of their skin, but on the content of their character. Now, it's like the judge. Let's talk about the other thing. The replacement on the Supreme Court.
Amy
Barrett.
Yep.
Okay. Now, Amy Barrett is a woman who has. She's a Catholic. She's got 7 children. 2 of them have been adopted from Haiti. Okay, and they've tried to attack her because of her politics. Okay, if that was someone that they had put in, and the Republicans attacked her in the way that they've attacked her, they'd be screaming racist, sexist, and all sorts of other things. They are so hypocritical, and their double standards are sickening, the left wing and the Democrats in America. This woman is a perfect choice to replace the previous judge that passed away recently.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, she's the more progressive judge, as they like to call themselves, progressive, or basically left-wing, who passed away. And, all the left were screaming like, Donald Trump shouldn't be replacing her until the election's been sorted out. Well, let me tell you, there's been plenty of examples where presidents in the past have had something like this happen in the final year of their term, before an election or before re-election, and they have replaced judges on the Supreme Court before. So this is all rubbish. In fact, there's even video of Obama saying that it's perfectly appropriate for the president to do this sort of thing. So, as usual, it all depends on who's in charge as to what stance they have. They've got no consistency at all in what they say. Okay? Yeah. If the Republicans are in, it's black. If the Democrats are in, it's white. Same issue, different stance on it, depending on who's in. It's just hypocritical to say the least. But anyway, she will be a brilliant judge on the Supreme Court, and she has also come out and said that it is not my job to dictate what the policy ought to be or to interpret things with my own personal preferences. I am there to adjudicate the law as it is written. And that's the way it should be. And I can tell you now that a lot of left-wing leaning judges ought to take heed of that, because a lot of them have been interpreting things in their own little biased way. And we see examples of that here in Victoria and in Australia as well.
They just press the left-wing agenda.
Okay? Yet again, because they're put in by their left-wing masters in the Labor Party.
I think Americans though did prove the world wrong when Trump was elected. The whole world thought that was never going to happen, but I think they proved themselves to be a lot smarter than what we think, and it's it was the hidden majority that got him over the line. The silent hidden majority. Yep.
Well, you know what? One of the best things that I guess, or one of the things that gives me a little bit of comfort about Trump's re-election chances, despite the fact that the polls are saying he's going to get absolutely annihilated.
Well, is that no different to the election against Hillary Clinton? It's exactly
well,
the same.
that's right.
Yeah.
Is that so many Trump voters have learned.
We had it here, Scott Morrison, Bill Shorten.
Well, first of all, most Trump voters do not feel comfortable admitting that they're a Trump voter. Because if they do,
you're crucified for it.
They get crucified at work. They get crucified at their friends. They get crucified in the community. Anyone who is not a Trump voter chastises them for it. We've seen examples of people walking down the street with a red "Make America Great Again" hat on, and they get attacked, physically attacked. I think there was an example recently where someone got shot. Because they had a Trump hat on.
Yep.
Now, that's the risk that people take in showing their support for Donald Trump. So a lot of people, when they're contacted by these companies who do the surveys and the polls, I'll be voting Democrat, but they're not going to vote Democrat. They're going to vote Republican.
They don't want to be heard saying that they'll vote. Yep.
That's the extent to which the left wing tries to hound people.
Well, we saw that here
into voting the way that they want them to vote, and anyone who dares
say otherwise,
say that they're a Trump supporter, you're on the black band list.
It's a really infectious thing. That's we saw it here with something that everybody knows of was the same-sex marriage vote that we had here. That I was all for it, absolutely. But for those people that I know that weren't, and a lot of these were, the elderly part of our population who have been brought up Catholic, strict Catholics, and all that type of thing, which they've been brought up in a way to have a certain opinion. Mm-hmm. And if we're in a democracy with the right for freedom of speech, well, why go to a vote if you're not going to, these are all these issues that come across, and it's just a real push from the left-wing agenda that no one is getting in their way. Yep. No one, under any circumstance, is going to get in our way. Yep. And we saw that here, it was just bullying, bullying.
Yeah, it is.
And it gets through to, yesterday I saw Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. Now this is how sad it is when you've got.
He's lost me.
No. He hasn't lost me because I know that's bullshit, right?
What do you know is bullshit?
No. This is the problem with
these celebrities who think that their opinion of who they're going to endorse.
I'll tell you what this is.
I'll tell you what this is. Vote.
This is the infiltration through every part of society. You've got Hollywood that are going to threaten these actors, right? Mm-hmm. If they don't endorse a certain political party or a certain agenda, that they're out of work. And I guarantee that's where this has come from.
Well, then I lost respect for him.
Hollywood, right, and all these bloody cults that they are, that have got these wackos amongst them running the bloody joint.
Yep.
This is what's happening. You've got people like that who is so respected by so many people, forced into publicly stating a bloody...
And getting on video with Biden and Kamala
ridiculous.
Harris.
Now, why do you think that happened? Come on. These people don't bloody really side with these wackos.
I don't care.
That is bullshit.
I don't care. He's done it. He's prepared to diminish himself and be subjected to bullying like that, where he's said, okay, I'll give you what you want. I'll go on and tell Biden that I'm voting for him. In fact, I think he mainly spoke to her, like he was voting for her rather than him.
Well, that's what I said. That's exactly what people... If people vote for Biden, that's who you're voting for.
You're voting for
Harris. So you better get to know who Harris is, because that is who you're voting for, because it's going to they'll quickly change hands. Mm-hmm. Right? You've got bloody the worst vice president who served for the worst president in history.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way,
with a pathetic running mate. What state is the Western world going to enter into with that running the biggest economy in the world?
Well, again, I don't care whether he's being bullied to do it or not. If he's not prepared to tell them to get stuffed,
This is what these people have to
Okay.
gamble with. You're gambling with, and it happens here. It's like, forget that he's a Hollywood actor. We've got it here. I know people in certain organisations, big organisations, that you know who I'm talking about, right? Which organisation I'm talking about, that made public statements about the gay vote when it happened, and they were told internally, you don't have an opposing opinion, otherwise you're out the door. This is what people. You've got to gamble with your job and your
Wouldn't have to
livelihood.
be the AFL, right?
Right.
You mean that company, that organisation that changed their logo at the front of their building from AFL to YES because that's the way they wanted everyone to vote?
So isn't that contradicting?
That is
Isn't that contradicting when you're promoting equality, right?
I don't care which way you
Equal
think.
opinion,
That's wrong. Even if you
freedom of speech.
yeah.
It is ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I'm
All this song and dance about them being so compassionate and promoting, equality.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what this word means? Because what they promote is far from fucking equality,
it's not equality.
right? There is nothing about it that is equal. There is no freedom involved. There is no freedom of speech involved.
Yep.
There is nothing about it that is that. Mm-hmm. It happens everywhere. It is their way or no way. It's ridiculous.
And you know where they're starting all this? In the schools. And that's another subject that we're going to take
We're going
up
to talk about another
time.
episode. Yeah.
The education departments of this country, our children are being indoctrinated with left-wing minded thinking.
Yep.
And that's where it all starts.
And I get what you're saying about, the fact you need to stand up, and these people, you lose respect because they can't stand up and tell them to get stuff, but they're being caught in between a rock and a hard place. Like you're gambling with your livelihood. That's where they catch you.
Yep.
They catch you in these organisations that, what do you do? You're gambling with a livelihood or a reputation.
Yep. Well, again, why Hollywood or anyone that's so-called famous or a celebrity in America thinks that their opinion is so damn, more valuable than the average person, and that everyone who likes them should vote the way that they tell them to vote? They've got an overinflated opinion of themselves. I think the majority of Americans see through all of that, certainly the ones who've got any common
Well, we
sense.
saw proof of that in the election.
Okay, and they are actually put off. I know I am. Whenever I see anyone come out and all of a sudden endorse, politically one person or another, I get put off them. I get totally put off them. And what I do appreciate is someone who puts the country first. Okay, and in our case here in Australia, I like to see people who have views that put the country's best interest first, or our state here in Victoria first, or our city here in Melbourne first. That's what I like to see. That they're not talking through their own pockets or their own personal gain. They're looking at what's best for us and our children.
A true patriot.
Yes.
A true patriot.
Yep.
And, if that means being called a racist and all that, so be it. And someone like Donald Trump has stood up publicly many, many, many times, and he does every day in front of the media. He gets crucified for it, but he says it as it is, and he says what he needs to say to stand up for America and America's future, and that's the bottom line.
Yep.
And he proves it with actions.
Absolutely he does.
Everything he has said from day one, he has proved by his actions.
If we lose that sense of patriotism, we're prepared to trash it. And there's too many people that are trashing it. It would be so easy if we don't protect it to see it go down the chute. I mean, Australia, don't think that it can't be totally trashed to the point where it's irreparable.
Yeah, what can happen very easily. You look at
other
economies
countries
like Greece.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You look at other countries around the world that have gone into massive debt. All of a sudden, they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
When you start borrowing money in order to just pay the interest on your borrowings, well, you're in massive trouble then.
Borrowing from other countries that are in just as much debt.
Well, actually, I'll tell you what. One of these future episodes, I'll replay. We'll replay a clip I've got of the famous John Clark, and his sidekick there. I'm trying to remember his name.
That is super
Brian
funny,
something, and talking about
it's a good funny skit
talking about countries that are in debt.
Yeah.
And, we might play that next time.
We will. All right, so we want to wrap up here, but we'll make a quick note, Vince. A massive thank you. This has started as something that wasn't planned to really go anywhere. It was just a bit of fun, but The interest
It was
has
a
been massive.
robust discussion amongst the three of us,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
and people have taken interest, and it's
By
quite.
the way, I'd like to thank Richard Stockman for letting us get a word in here today. Rich, wherever you are, I hope you're campaigning well and getting those votes up in the Shire of Nillumbik. But hopefully we'll see Richard next week. No promises, but...
and a massive thank you to everybody for tuning in and supporting, getting behind us and joining in on the discussion. We've had a few people messaging and bringing up some topics and issues, which is pretty cool. And again, we're no experts. We're not promoting that in any way.
Look, if you do like the show, please share it with others, promote it as best you can for us. If you do like it and you think other people enjoy it, and if you don't like it, just keep it to yourself.
So on next week's episode, we're going to cover off a few things. We're going to touch on education, mental health, which is a big one. We're also going to get a special guest involved as well for that, an expert. The US debate, so we're going to review that because that would have happened by then. And also we're going to touch on the real estate and property market as well and how that is getting back to business and affecting us all with regards to investment. So stay tuned. We hope to see you again next week. And again, thanks for all the support so far. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Political Spin. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Stay connected. Follow us on social media at Beyond Political Spin.